Imagine standing on the edge of a mountain, looking down into a canyon so deep that the road below appears almost like a thin line. Now imagine someone telling you, "We're going to build a bridge across this." Not a small bridge. A bridge nearly 1,200 meters long, suspended hundreds of meters above the canyon floor. And the remarkable part isn't simply the size, it's the location. Because almost everything about this landscape seemed to make construction harder. This is the story of China's Aizhai Bridge. Deep in Hunan Province, near Jishu, the Dehang Canyon cuts through a landscape of cliffs, forests, and steep mountain walls. For generations, crossing this region meant following the mountains instead of going straight through them. One mountain road became particularly notorious. It stretched for roughly 6 kilometers along a steep slope, climbing hundreds of meters while twisting through a long series of sharp turns. But China wanted to change that. The plan was to connect this remote mountainous region with a modern expressway. And there was one major obstacle standing in the way: the canyon. Engineers spent years studying the terrain. They looked at different bridge locations, different routes, and different designs. 7 possible bridge sites were examined, along with 8 route options, before the final plan was chosen. The solution was a suspension bridge across Dehang Canyon. Its main span would stretch 1,176 meters. The roadway would sit roughly 336 meters above the canyon floor. And on both sides, the bridge would connect directly toward tunnels through the mountains. On paper, the route made sense. Building it was another matter. The question was simple: how do you construct a bridge this large when there is almost nowhere to work from? The cliffs were steep. The geology was complicated. Caves and fractured rock existed around the tower foundations. Fog could suddenly cover the canyon, and strong winds could make precise construction hundreds of meters above the ground even more difficult. The engineers weren't just dealing with the size of the bridge, they had to build it around the terrain itself. Construction began in 2007. From that point on, every major component had to be transported, lifted, positioned, and secured in a landscape where access was extremely limited. But the towers were only the beginning. Once they were standing, thousands of tons of steel still had to cross the empty space between them. There was no ordinary road that could simply carry everything into the canyon. So the engineers needed another solution: a way to move massive sections of the bridge through open air, hundreds of meters above the ground. And that was the next challenge waiting for the Aizhai Bridge. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about extraordinary engineering, impossible places, and the ideas that make them possible, take a moment to subscribe to Snap Genius. Because what happened next is where Aizhai Bridge stopped looking like a conventional construction project. The bridge had to carry a massive steel deck across a canyon more than 300 meters deep. But conventional construction methods were difficult here. There was no convenient ground beneath the bridge where cranes could simply operate. No wide construction platform across the valley. And even getting huge steel components through the mountains was a challenge in itself. The engineers had to rethink the entire process. One of their most important decisions was simple in concept. They separated the towers from the bridge deck. The towers could rise above the tunnels, while the deck followed the mountain route below them. This reduced the amount of excavation required and allowed the bridge to work with the landscape rather than against it. But solving the design problem didn't make the steel deck any easier. Aizhai Bridge required thousands of tons of steel. Some individual components weighed as much as 120 tons. And those pieces had to be assembled hundreds of meters above the canyon floor. So the construction team developed what became known as the track cable sliding method. Instead of lifting every massive section directly from the ground, engineers used temporary track cables to move the steel across the canyon. Sections could be pushed horizontally along the cables, gradually moving toward the center. Piece by piece, section by section, the bridge began taking shape above empty air. What made the method especially remarkable was that the developing suspension system was also becoming part of the construction process. The bridge wasn't simply being built in the canyon. Its own structure was helping make the construction possible. But the environment continued to create problems. Fog could suddenly swallow the canyon. Strong winds could make work at height dangerous. And beneath the foundations, the rock was far from simple. Caves and unstable formations were hidden inside the mountains. Near one of the tower foundations, engineers discovered 18 karst caves, with the largest approaching 10,000 cubic meters. Before the bridge could carry a single vehicle, engineers first had to understand the ground supporting it. Then came the main cables. These weren't ordinary cables. Each one contained thousands upon thousands of high-strength steel wires designed to carry enormous loads. Once secured, they would form the backbone of the suspension system. And slowly, the impossible began to look real. A bridge was taking shape between two mountains. It wasn't supported by columns rising from the canyon floor. It wasn't being assembled from a conventional road running through the valley. It was suspended above the canyon itself. Then the final steel sections were connected. The separate pieces became one continuous structure. After years of planning, engineering, risk, and relentless construction, Aizhai Bridge was finally ready to do what it had been designed to do: connect two sides of a mountain range that nature had kept apart for generations. But the most remarkable part of the story wasn't simply the size of the bridge. It was what happened after it opened. On March 31st, 2012, Aizhai Bridge officially opened to traffic. After years of planning and construction, vehicles could finally cross Dehang Canyon in just a matter of minutes. A journey that once meant navigating a twisting mountain road could now be replaced by a direct crossing high above the valley. The bridge itself was enormous. Its main span stretched 1,176 meters. Its total tunnel-to-tunnel length was about 1,534 meters. And the roadway sat roughly 336 meters above the canyon floor. Those numbers make Aizhai Bridge impressive, but they don't explain why it became so important. The bridge was built as part of the Jishou-To-Chadong Expressway, helping connect the mountainous region to a much faster transportation network. The difficult journey through this landscape became dramatically shorter. But something else happened. The bridge changed the way people experienced the mountains. A place that had once been a transportation barrier became a destination. People began coming not just to cross the bridge, but to stand above the canyon and look down from hundreds of meters in the air. The bridge also includes sightseeing walkways, giving visitors the chance to experience the structure from within. And that created an unusual transformation. A bridge built to overcome the mountain became one of the reasons people came to see it. Aizhai Bridge also became known for its engineering innovations. Its 1,176-meter main span, tunnel-to-tunnel design, separated tower and deck concept, rock-anchored suspension system, and track cable sliding construction method all contributed to making it a remarkable engineering project. But perhaps the most important lesson isn't found in any of those records. The engineers didn't overcome the mountains by simply cutting through them. They studied the terrain. They worked around it, and they adapted the design to the landscape. Instead of forcing the mountain to fit the bridge, they found a way for the bridge to fit the mountain. That's what makes Aizhai Bridge more than a bridge. It is a reminder that some of humanity's biggest achievements begin with a very simple question. What if we stop trying to make an impossible place easier and find a way to cross it instead? Today, vehicles move across the canyon where there was once only empty air. Thousands of tons of steel hang between two mountains, and hundreds of meters below, the river continues through the same landscape it always has. The mountains didn't move, the canyon didn't disappear. We simply found another way across. And perhaps that's what engineering really is. Not conquering nature, understanding it well enough to work with it. If you want more stories about the world's most extraordinary structures, forgotten engineering breakthroughs, and places where people built what once seemed impossible, subscribe to Snap Genius. Because somewhere in the world, another impossible place is already waiting for someone to find a way through.